to a hospital in South Sudan. And the Chinese president has spoken to his counterparts, American President Donald Trump and Russia's Vladimir Putin. Your latest news. Greetings to our listeners. An unknown number of aid workers are missing after airstrikes hit a hospital in South Sudan near the Ethiopian border. The hospital is run by medical charity Doctors Without Borders in Jonglei State. There's been a resurgence in fighting in Jonglei State recently between government forces and those loyal to Vice President Riek Machar, who has been suspended from his post after being accused of plotting to overthrow President Salva Kiir. There are fears that the fighting could reignite a full-blown civil war in the world's youngest nation. Britain has sanctioned 6 individuals suspected of committing atrocities in Sudan's war or fueling the conflict through the supply of mercenaries and military equipment. The measures target senior commanders in both the Sudanese paramilitary group Rapid Support Forces and the Sudanese Armed Forces. In a statement, British Foreign Minister Yvette Cooper said through these sanctions, the country will seek to dismantle the war machine of those who perpetrate or profit from the brutal violence in Sudan. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has defended his decision not to fire Police Minister Senzo Mchunu, who is currently on special leave while receiving his full salary and ministerial benefits. Ramaphosa accepted the Madlanga Commission interim report's recommendations regarding police misconduct and corruption. Ramaphosa has faced harsh criticism for leaving out Mchunu when he announced that action would be taken against implicated government officials. While on an oversight visit to the South African Revenue Service National Command Center in Brooklyn, Pretoria, Ramaphosa told the media that at the right time, he is going to respond to all Madlanga Commission of Inquiry recommendations.
The Madlanga Commission issued an interim report, and I have studied it, and I've accepted the recommendations, and the work of the Commission continues. And I know people have specifically asked about Minister Mchunu. And I have said I am waiting for that process to be completed. And it's going to be completed in 3 months. And I'm not going to, in the end, let the Madlanga Commission report or recommendations not be implemented. The problem at times is that people focus on one issue. Like right now, they're focusing on Minister Mchunu.
The United Nations Human Rights Chief Volker Turk has appealed for funds, warning that donors' cuts have reduced the work of his agency to survival mode. He has asked for $400 million, $100 million less than last year. The BBC's Imogen Fox.
Human rights gets only a small fraction of the United Nations' overall budget, but in 2025, member states still contributed less than they had promised. Human rights work in Yemen and Myanmar was cut back. Investing in human rights is an investment in peace for everyone, the UN believes. But with traditional donors in the US and Europe increasingly focused on economic challenges at home, it may be hard to convince them.
Lastly, all 3 parties say progress has been made in talks between Washington, Moscow and Kiev seeking an end to the war in Ukraine. No details have been provided by negotiators at the meeting in Abu Dhabi that say they have agreed to yet another exchange of prisoners of war, several of which have previously taken place. The BBC's Sarah Rainford.
I think the reality is that there's been no major breakthrough, and it's simply the fact that those talks are ongoing that perhaps can be seen as positive. Certainly on that key issue, the very, very sensitive issue of territory, there are reports from pro-Kremlin media in Russia suggesting that Russia's position is in fact hardening, that not only is it demanding the rest of the Donbass region in the east of Ukraine, but it also wants to ensure that that territory is recognized internationally as belonging to Russia. Now, of course, that is utterly unacceptable to Ukraine.
Recapping on your top stories, an unknown number of aid workers are missing after airstrikes hit a hospital in South Sudan near the Ethiopian border. The hospital is run by medical charity Doctors Without Borders in Jonglei State. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Tsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, look at just how Spanish teams spent money during the recently concluded transfer window, while a huge increase on the cards for the T20 World Cup winners. Details of these and other stories coming up at 4:30.
Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
It is exactly 6 minutes after 4 p.m. A very good afternoon to you, Senegal. Good afternoon, Ghana, Kenya, Eritrea, Libya. Good afternoon, Africa. Welcome to Africa in Business on Channel Africa. Coming up this afternoon, a roundup of the World Government Summit, which wraps up in Dubai. And the Minister for the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition in South Africa, Park Style, about to sign the Africa-China deal with China. The China-Africa Economic Partnership Agreement is what it's called. We're going to be focusing on that, as well as some adjustments being made by the South African Revenue Services, ensuring that tax liabilities for corporates remain in the country. That and a whole lot more coming up this afternoon on Africa in Business.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa. Channel Africa is evolving, and so are you. Stay connected wherever you are with our brand new website and mobile app. Stream your favorite shows, catch up on African news, culture, and conversations, all at your fingertips.
Africa is just a tap away.
Your world, your stories, now on the go.
Stay connected wherever you are.
Visit channelafrica.co.za or download the Channel Africa app today. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
It is exactly 8 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. Now, as the World Government Summit, the WGS 2026, wraps up in Dubai, African leaders and financial experts are intensifying calls for the continent to shift away from aid. We do know that this has been the key financial resource for African governments for decades. But this aid dependence is now coming to an end. And the call is for African governments to prioritize investment-led growth. Speaking during a panel discussion titled Government and the Future of Investment, an African Perspective, how the continent can unlock private capital at a pivotal moment in its economic transformation, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, the 8th president of the African Development Bank Group, says Africa stands at a defining crossroads. For more on this, we joined on the line by Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, the former president of the African Development. A very good afternoon to you, Doctor. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Thank you very much, Thami. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Quite a pivotal moment and some very timely discussions and debates being held at the World Government Summit. Now, you mentioned there and emphasized that Africa needs investment rather than aid. And we can all see that that era of aid is fast coming to an end. Why is this shift so critical for the long-term growth as well as the transformation of African economies, Doctor?
Well, first and foremost, I don't think aid is the way to grow anyway. You know, it's like you're holding a walking stick, and eventually you keep cutting it, you're going to fall over. So that's one thing to keep in mind. You know, when you actually develop with your own strategy, you are in control of that strategy. You are also going to be able to control your priorities. You'll be able to also build yourself in a more resilient manner. And of course, you're going to be able to actually attract private capital. Look, private capital is the way to grow. And so I believe that the key for Africa is to move away from aid into investment-led growth. And we have quite a lot of things to do for that. Take a look at the GDP growth for Africa. Real GDP growth of Africa by IMF shows that Africa is the fastest growing region in the world, period, of all regions of the world. But not only that, Thami, for the first time ever, Africa is actually going to be growing for the next 4 years consecutively, being the fastest growing region in the world. And Africa is delivering a significant amount of value. If you look at all that's been done in terms of investment in Africa, in returns on infrastructure, return on real asset investments, they have yielded more than low to mid-teens of returns in the last 10 years alone. So that tells you that Africa is investable. And that's what I want us focusing on. Africa as an investment-driven destination. Yes.
So, Doctor, it looks like the environment is opportune and is at its peak for the continent to benefit from this. But what are the biggest obstacles that African economies face in attracting this long-term investment? And I'm speaking particularly around issues of policy certainty as well as the structural reforms that need to be taking place. Should governments be doing more to prioritize an investment-friendly environment over and above the GDP forecasts?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. Capital, to welcome capital, you have to make sure that you get your house in order. One of the key things is that you got to also make sure that the policy reforms are the right policy reforms. Look, investors don't like, they're not looking for a situation where it is a perfection. They're just looking for predictability. That predictability requires that you do a number of things. First and foremost, that your policy environment requires that you can't just change policies overnight. So that's one thing that's very important. The macroeconomic environment is very important. How you manage your inflation, your debt and currency volatility is very, very critical. You also have to make sure that people can have arbitration. They have to be able to have rule of law and those things that actually bring transparency. In addition, most companies that want to come to Africa, the challenge is sometimes it takes a long time to get a business registered. So when you have actually digital systems that people can register on their digital platform to invest, yes, they can also register on land registries. They can also register to make sure they have their permits. All those things are good. And finally, of course, is reforms around your taxes and also the customs reforms. The tax regime have to be one that is actually quite simple for people to do. And you also have to make sure that you don't have, retroactive taxes that people have already invested and you change the rule of the game while it is on. That's always a no-no for investors. Investors are not scared of actually losing money. They are more scared about not being able to get their money out. So at the end of the day, you've got to also be able to make sure that they can get their capital out, both in terms of their profit and their capital. Yes, so the heads of state that we are working with within the Global Africa Investment Summit are all committed to all these critical reforms that would make sure that capital can not only come to Africa, stay in Africa, but grow in Africa.
You've really mentioned the key fundamentals of what investors need. Let's take a look at African financial institutions, including the African Development Bank itself. Have these institutions done enough to mobilize both local and international investment?
Yeah, well, I used to be, I was president of African Development Bank for 10 years. I think multilateral development banks are doing a great job. The African Development Bank, we did a great job. And I've got a new person taking over me, and he will do a great job. But the things that the multilateral development banks have to continue to do is that they have, concessional finances. So blended finance is very important to reduce the weighted cost of capital that the private sector is going to need. There's no doubt there are risks that we still have to look at. So private, partial credit guarantees and partial risk guarantees are going to be critical to have that. You will have a number of projects that are great projects, but you need to also de-risk them. And so for that, you also need to make sure that viability gap issues are done. And so these multilateral development banks can help with government to close some of these viability gaps. And of course, you have political risk, which is also important. They have political risk insurance that they can use. So in any case, we are still going to work quite a lot with them to make sure that's been done. I think that the multilateral development banks and other financial institutions, by their risk products, are going to be important, especially, in most of the African countries, a lot of the investments have to also be in local currency. So having local currency hedging instruments are also going to be important. And so there's a role for everybody.
So let's look, Doctor, at the perhaps lowest hanging fruit, the strongest opportunities for foreign investments to act as a catalyst for growth. Which are the sectors would you highlight that offer the greatest potential for a truly transformative investment landscape?
First and foremost, you got to get the energy right. So the energy sector is going to be very, very important, for Africa. Agriculture, of course, 65% of the uncultivated arable land left in the world to feed 9.5 billion people. It's not in Asia, it's not in Latin America, it's not in Europe, it's not in America, it's in Africa. So that is going to be a very, very critical sector. But also the minerals and metals and critical minerals and metals and rare earth is big. Look, Africa, Thami, has $6 trillion of reserves of these critical minerals and rare earth. And this is where we are going to get the most value from. But the key is we are not going to be just selling those raw materials, again, like we've always been doing. That's the door to poverty. All we've got to do is to structure it properly that Africa is going to be able to engage. Look, lithium, cobalt, platinum, the price is going to, value is going to rise by 3 times in the next few years. And so what Africa has to do, what we are going to help them to do through the Global Africa Investment Summit is to structure a lot of these, their assets, and structure in such a way that those assets can be de-risk, investable grade portfolio into which global investors can actually invest. But there's no doubt in my mind that those assets are there. What's often very much missing is how to systematically de-risk those assets and to make sure that people can know what the assets are, what are their values, and how are you going to structure them in a way that makes them attractive for global investors. So yes, the opportunities are there, but we've got to structure it properly. And I think our platform is the right way to do it transparently in a way that gives confidence to global investors.
Dr. Adesina, I'm sure you'll agree with me that ultimately the main aim is for Africa as a continent to be self-reliant. As we move away from aid, is there a risk that increased foreign investment could in fact replace one form of dependency with another? How can the continent safeguard against that?
Now, you got a good point there, but the thing is, I think we've got to not be afraid of capital, right? Capital grows everywhere in the world, and I think that the key is by going with private capital, first and foremost, you are able to attract significant amount of foreign investment into the countries that we are talking about. Secondly, those countries can develop without having to need aid. Third is that when you have the discipline of private capital, you have to be more transparent, okay, in how things are done. So back to your point in terms of improving the policy environment, I think you are going to make sure that that gets done. But in everything that we do, we have to make sure, and we will make sure, that those assets are not assets that are giveaway. Africa doesn't have to give away any asset. It just simply has to monetize the returns for those assets while controlling those assets by itself. And this is exactly what we are going to help it to do. And so I feel, in my view, that the roles of our communities are very, very important. Our local content is very, very critical, and making sure that ESG, environmental, social governance issues are very well done. So there's no fear here about Africa having private sector taking over things. No. Each of these countries will have the right parameters in which they are going to engage. The key is unlock the assets for African communities, for Africans themselves, and create jobs for a lot of the young people in Africa. So the safeguards are in place to ensure that this works for Africa, but not simply working for somebody else.
Dr. Adesina, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you very much for your insight and your time as the World Government Summit wraps up in Dubai. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Thami.
Thank you. That's Dr. Akinwumi Adesina. He is the former president of the African Development Bank. He takes us to exactly 19 and a half minutes after 4 p.m.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
Now, the United States chapter of the South African Chamber of Commerce has welcomed the reauthorization of the African Growth and Opportunities Act until the end of the year, which for now still does include South Africa as a beneficiary. U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer also issued a statement confirming the extension would apply retroactively to September last year when AGOA expired. Greer indicated that AGOA for the 21st century had to demand more from the United States trading partners and expressed a willingness to work with Congress over the next year in order to modernize the program to better align with President Donald Trump's America First trade policy. Sherwin Bryce Peace has this report.
In signing a new government funding deal into law, President Trump also reauthorized AGOA for 1 year, backdated until September last year. A move described as having a stabilizing effect for South Africa by the U.S. chapter of the South African Chamber of Commerce, whose president is Neil Diamond.
Over the past few months, uncertainty created concern and real concern for companies managing long-term contracts, investors assessing opportunities and risk, and workers whose livelihoods depend on the AGOA framework. This decision removes a lot of that uncertainty and the cloud that was hanging over business, restoring some business confidence within a framework that business can operate. We need to be clear, it doesn't remove the tariff regime that has been implemented, especially reciprocal tariffs. But it at least gives us a breath of air in an environment where we need to continue bilateral trade between South Africa and the United States.
A statement from the U.S. Trade Representative Jamison Greer said his office would work with relevant U.S. agencies to give effect to any modifications made to the harmonized tariff schedule of the United States as a result of AGOA's reauthorization. The reciprocal tariffs imposed by President Trump last year appear to undercut AGOA's benefits, although the legality of those unilateral levies remain the subject of a legal review by the Supreme Court after 2 lower courts already ruled them illegal, creating an additional layer of confusion in terms of what exactly the road ahead looks like, as Diamond explained.
We know that South Africa is the largest beneficiary under AGOA for sub-Sahara Africa, specifically in key sectors such as automotive manufacturing, agriculture and agro-processing, wine and value-added food products, and then industrial and manufactured components. Where we've been subject to those tariffs, AGOA is really going to give us some relief from those tariffs. Exactly how this plays out will be dependent on an engagement between the U.S. Trade Representative Jamie Greer, as well as Minister Park Stow and the team from the Department of Trade and Industry. But we at least see this as a step in the right direction, restoring business confidence in the U.S.-South Africa economic relationship.
An overnight post on X by the principal deputy spokesperson of the State Department, Tommy Pigott, sharply criticized South Africa's decision to expel a senior Israeli diplomat from the country as, quote, another example of its poor foreign policy choices, after DIRCO declared the Israeli chargé d'affaires persona non grata for what it referred to as a series of unacceptable violations of diplomatic norms, raising questions about how the diplomatic relationship between Washington and Pretoria could impact the economic relationship moving forward, with any country's continued inclusion in AGOA now at the behest of the US president, who's empowered to exclude or suspend the country from the trade pact.
Under the current AGOA determinations, South Africa still remains eligible, but that eligibility is not automatic. It is subject to certain statutory and regulatory requirements, and that relates around to market access, trade openness, but also South Africa's foreign policy. And I think that is where economics and business becomes clouded. We'd like to stay as business out of the political environment, but we do encourage both governments for the sake of our bilateral trade and the benefit to both our countries to resolve those diplomatic issues.
Diamond said he viewed continued engagement around a bilateral trade agreement between Pretoria and Washington as moving in the right direction, while expressing optimism that a new modernized AGOA could be extended beyond the current December 31st deadline, with any signals from the White House and the trade representative being watched closely. I'm Shervin Bryce-Pease in New York.
Your life, your rhythm, your Africa. Channel Africa. Find it for free on Google Play and the Apple App Store. Africa. It's time to plug into the heartbeat of the continent. Tune in to Channel Africa, your go-to radio station that broadcasts in 5 different languages.
L'Afrique du Sud célèbre la journée nationale du
Kabla hujaitwa kwa jina la Double K
or more of our forests have been destroyed.
Tamo ndi
Partido Africano da Independência da Guiné.
See, Channel Africa represents every corner of this amazing land. From Lagos to Cape Town, Nairobi to Dakar, we've got you covered with the freshest news, music, and cultures. So, turn up the volume, feel the rhythm. Enjoy the conversation. Channel Africa, the African perspective. African enterprise meets global opportunity. Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
It is 26 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African Time. South Africa has taken a major step in deepening its economic ties with the rest of the African continent. President Cyril Ramaphosa says the country's accession to the African Export-Import Bank marks a strategic move to boost intra-African trade, industrial development and regional value chains. Speaking in Johannesburg at the signing of the instrument of accession on Wednesday, Ramaphosa described the partnership as both ambitious and timely, as AfricaInBusiness pledged an $8 billion investment into South Africa's economy. Channel Africa's reporter Michael Mbewe filed this report.
The signing ceremony marks South Africa's formal transition to Class A shareholder status in AfricaInBusiness and signals the activation of strategic partnership aimed at advancing industrial development, export-led growth, and deeper intra-Africa trade integration. In his remarks, President Cyril Ramaphosa said the signing represents an intentional, inclusive and ambitious step designed to deliver meaningful impact.
Today's signing signals a deliberate as well as an ambitious and more impactful phase in our country's economic engagement with our beloved African continent as well as the world. For South Africa, the decision to accede to AfricaInBusiness represents a strategic alignment. We seek to contribute to an Africa that prioritizes intracontinental trade, that builds its own industrial base and capacity, and also mobilizes African financial institutions to support development.
Ramaphosa added that the partnership will boost South Africa's support for exporters, industrial projects and regional value chains at a time of both challenge and opportunity.
This partnership will strengthen in more ways than one South Africa's ability to support exporters, South African exporters that is, industrial projects and regional value chains while advancing our continent's development. South Africa accedes to AfricaInBusiness at a time of both challenge, which at times makes people terrified, but it is also a time of great opportunity for our continent and indeed for our country as well.
AfricaInBusiness President George Elombi announced an initial $8 billion funding package for South Africa, describing it as a deliberate and purposeful commitment, marking the country's full membership of the bank.
I'm therefore pleased, Your Excellency, that together with the South African Department of Trade and Industry, under the leadership of Honorable Minister Parks Tau, we have put together with him and his colleagues what we consider an important package to signify that South Africa's complete membership of AfricaInBusiness was intended, it was deliberate, it was purposeful. We have put together an important package of $8 billion United States dollars, an initial package of $8 billion United States dollars for South Africa.
He said the funding will focus on local processing of natural resources, mineral beneficiation, automotive manufacturing, and the expansion of industrial parks and special economic zones to boost jobs, revenue, and value retention in South Africa.
We intend to do very heavy investments in the local processing of natural resources, thereby helping retain value within our economies, create jobs, generate wealth for our people. For that's the ultimate objective. We intend to expand the revenue base for the South African fiscal authorities. In particular, we will prioritize mineral processing, the expansion of the automotive manufacturing and development, and the expansion of industrial parks and specialized zones.
Speaking virtually, Secretary General of African Continental Free Trade Area, Wamkele Mene, said South Africa's accession to AfricaInBusiness sends a strong signal of commitment to African-led solutions, stressing that trade finance is critical to the success of continental integration under the AfCFTA.
This ceremony is therefore significant not just for South Africa and AfricaInBusiness, it is also significant for the implementation of the AfCFTA. The success of the AfCFTA depends not only on market access, but also on the availability of trade finance to support production and trade-enabling infrastructure. Today's event sends a clear and powerful signal that Africa's leading economies are committed to African solutions by supporting and enabling African institutions to finance Africa's economic development and continental integration.
Michael Mbewe, Channel Africa News, Johannesburg.
It is exactly 31 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time, wherever on the continent or in the world where you may be. Welcome to Africa in Business. Let's head over now to the markets desk for the latest market indicators with Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Thami. Good afternoon. $1 is trading at 15 rands 99 in South Africa, Botswana 13 pula 19, Namibia 15 Namibian dollars 99, Zambia 19 kwacha 50 to the US dollar. In Kenya, the dollar is 128 shillings 01, Ethiopia 154 birr 73, Uganda 3,000 shilling 538, Tanzania 2,000 shilling 572. $1 in Nigeria is 1,000 naira 376, Egypt 46 Egyptian pound 91, Tunisia 2 dinar 86, Algeria 128 dinar 91, Morocco 90 ram 01. Angola, the dollar is 912 kwanza, the Congolese franc is 2,120. Looking at commodities, gold is at $4,855, platinum at $2,034 per ounce, the price of Brent crude oil at $68.12 a barrel. That is all from me. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
And for the latest from the business of sport, a very good afternoon to you, Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you so much, Thami. A very good afternoon from the Sports Day. So the ICC Men's T20 World Cup prize pool is estimated to increase by approximately 20% compared to the 2024 edition, potentially reaching $13.5 million. So in 2024, the total prize pool was $11.25 million, with winners receiving $2.45 million, while the runner-ups walked away with $1.28 million. Now, India, the defending champions, will co-host the tournament with Sri Lanka. That's from the 7th of February to the 8th of March. Now, while the ICC has not yet released official figures, the projected increase reflects the tournament's growing commercial significance, driven by broadcast deals as well as heightened fan engagement and in the subcontinent. So this is the breakdown of what the champions and the runner-ups as well as the semi-finalists will potentially take home if there is an increase of about 20%. The champions walk away with $3 million, runner-ups $1.6 million. The losing semi-finalists each will walk away with $790,000. The teams finishing between 5th and 12th position will walk away with $380,000, while participation fee stands at $250,000. So this increase aligns with the tournament's return to the cricket mad subcontinent for the very first time since 2018, with the combination of India's massive broadcasting market as well as robust sponsorship ecosystem creates exceptional commercial value. India's role as defending champions as well as a co-host also adds further intrigue to the financial landscape. The team claimed the 2024 title after a thrilling final about 2 years ago. However, these figures remain estimates until the ICC, of course, makes an official announcement. The projected 20% increase reflects industry expectations rather than confirmed allocations, with final prize money details expected closer to the tournament start. A reminder, of course, that this tournament gets underway next week, Monday. That's the 7th of February. Onto this now. Earlier on this week, Atletico Madrid signed Nigerian forward Ademola Lookman from Atalanta in a deal with $40.3 million. Lookman will be the first English-born player to have played in the Premier League, the Bundesliga, Serie A, as well as La Liga. Meanwhile, Madrid, as well as the Seattle Sounders, have also reached an agreement for the transfer of Obed Vargas, who has signed to the club until 30 June 2013. Madrid made two big signings and also let go of a number of players during the January transfer window. Phil Treso-Moledes is a La Liga correspondent and looks at just how the club spent during the transfer window.
You know, the net spend is considerably lower than the overall spend because they have sold a lot of players for big money as well. They have brought money in, so they are balancing the books. Listen, I think what's really important with Diego Simeone's situation is to actually consider that they brought in a new superstar director of football in Matteo Alemany. He's come in this season. Previously worked at Valencia, previously worked at Barcelona. And when I say he is a superstar director of football, he really is. He is behind this signing of Ademola Lookman, and he was instrumental in bringing him to Atleti. And there have been one or two signs that Simeone and Alemany aren't necessarily on the same page. Simeone has been
Onto this now. When Chelsea's David Rafto Fornana completed a deadline day loan move to Strasbourg on Monday, he became the 12th transfer between the clubs this season. So the activity between the Blueco partners has started to raise eyebrows now. Rather than simple loan arrangements like that of Fofana, some players have moved back and forth for fees. Chelsea plugged head coach Liam Rossiner away as well, much to the annoyance of Strasbourg. There is no suggestion there is anything untoward, and the deals have also been carried out within the rules. But could such a high number of transfer between two teams within multi-club ownership be the trigger for FIFA or UEFA? So the game's governing bodies are keeping a close eye on the situation. So far, action has been limited to clubs being removed from competitions where there might be a conflict of interest. And finally, the NBA trade market has seen a flurry of activity in the run-up to deadline day, with the significant deals reshaping several teams. So a number of star players have found new homes, creating both excitement as well as speculation about the future of each roster. So with the 2026 NBA trade deadline on Thursday, the market jolted on Wednesday night when Golden State moved Jonathan Kuminga as well as Buddy Hield to Atlanta for Kristaps Porzingis. Now, James Harden, meanwhile, is set to join the Cleveland Cavaliers from the Los Angeles Clippers, with Darius Garland moving in the opposite direction after the sides agreed a trade. Although the deal is yet to be confirmed by the NBA, Harden said the opportunity to win a first championship was key in deciding to move. As part of the trade, the Clippers have also secured a second-round pick for this year's draft. It brings the time to 16:39 p.m. Central African Time. It concludes your sports news this afternoon on Channel Africa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, do send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. From markets to innovation. From markets to innovation. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni covers it all. With Africa's future in focus. Channel Africa. The African perspective.
It is exactly 20 minutes to 5 p.m. Central African Time. We turn our focus now to Waterfall City, a city north of Johannesburg in Gauteng, South Africa. It is actually a suburb. It continues to attract international companies. Property developer ATQ is planning several new developments for that area. This includes a conference centre and a hotel, amongst others. The new developments come amid the group's strong performance, which have been boosted by several transactions in recent years. Channel Africa's Nhlanhla Mahlangu reports.
Johannesburg is set to welcome a game-changing addition to its urban landscape as ATEC, a leading property developer, announced plans for a state-of-the-art conference center and a hotel in the heart of Waterfall City. With a staggering $1.71 billion allocated for the new development, the project promises to redefine the city's commercial and hospitality sectors. Gary Kotza, CEO at Century City Conference Center and Hotels, says the 15,000 square kilometer Waterfall City Conference Center and Hotel is designed to become a premier destination for business and leisure travelers alike.
I think we've been looking at expanding our business to Johannesburg for many years, even pre-COVID, and we've been exploring various options. And certainly Waterfall City seems to be the new where the hustle and bustle is in Johannesburg at the moment. It's an upcoming developing area. A lot of your top corporates are moving here. So we needed to find a location that was centrally located, and then you have a lot of people when they do attend conferences, they also want to explore the city a little bit, so it's central. And then you've got the Mall of Africa, one of the largest malls, I think, in the Southern Hemisphere. And everybody likes to do a little bit of shopping while they're attending a conference, especially your international clientele with the favorable exchange rate. We are targeting a lot of Africa business, and there's a lot of direct flights from Africa into Johannesburg.
He says the project will create a number of jobs.
It's twofold. The one side is on the construction side. I mean, already we're dealing with consultants and engineers and plumbers and electricians and so on in the planning stage. And then obviously we'll start construction. And there we expected to have between 800 and 1,000 construction workers on site and consultants on site at any given point, which is massively important. But then from day one, we envisage to have approximately 500 permanently employed employees from day one. So the job creation is significant. And what people often forget in the tourism space is the knock-on effect of job creation.
Chifiwa Chivenga, CEO at the Tourism Business Council of South Africa, says with these projects, Johannesburg is poised to become a leading destination for innovation, commerce and luxury in South Africa.
Well, this is a good addition to the product range that we have, especially when it comes to the MICE sector, which is the meetings, incentives, conferences, and exhibition. To have a new product, it means that there's confidence in the market. It means that there will be jobs that are going to be created over a longer period of time. Of course, there will be construction jobs that are involved in that, but after that, we take over, we run the hotel and the convention center. So it is a stamp of approval on the destination when you see investors coming in and saying there is a need for a conference center, there's a need for a hotel, and to put it in this node, which is the Midrand node, and here at Waterfall City area, it simply means that there is more action happening in this part of the Gauteng province. And I think there's a greater need to have more and more products, especially in this segment of the market, which is the MICE sector.
The new conference center and hotel facility is planned to act as a premier centrally located venue for business travelers, enhancing the existing hospitality offering near the Mall of Africa. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Ndlandla Mahlangu in Johannesburg.
It is exactly 4:44 Central African time as we turn our sights now to tax practitioners in South Africa warning that South Africans who have moved their offshore income may face a rude awakening. This is as the South African Revenue Bank rolls out new rules requiring all cross-border transfers of South African-sourced income to be cleared by the Revenue Service before funds can leave the country. They also caution that relinquishing South African citizenship does not automatically release individuals from their tax obligations, with residency and source of income remaining key factors in determining liability. For more on this, we joined on the line by Roxana Naidu, Head of Global Strategy at Letitia Africa. A very good afternoon to you, Roxana. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Thank you for having me, Thami.
So, Roxana, many people who leave South Africa to work or to settle abroad automatically assume that they have no tax obligation towards the South African Revenue Services. Is this the case?
Well, that's the thing. The assumption is that one of the biggest misunderstandings we see, leaving South Africa does not automatically end your tax obligations to SARS. What matters is that your tax resident status in South Africa aligns with what we see at SARS. It's not your physical location. So if you are still as a South African tax resident, SARS can tax your worldwide income, including income earned abroad. So even if you qualify for the foreign employment income exemption or relief under a tax treaty, you still generally have a reporting obligation. And to properly end South African tax residency, there's a formal process that must be followed and documented, of course. And until that can happen, SARS may continue to view you as a tax resident of South Africa and expect full disclosure of offshore income and assets.
So we understand that SARS is strengthening how it receives and uses third-party data, both locally as well as internationally. How will this affect South Africans who have permanently moved outside of South African borders?
I think that's the question that everybody wants answered right now. For me, it means that offshore financial activity is becoming far more visible to SARS. So through things like global information sharing frameworks and then your local reporting systems, SARS is increasingly receiving data from foreign banks, financial institutes, and other authorities. So for South Africans specifically, working abroad, living abroad, this reduces the gap between what SARS can see and what taxpayers think is private. So offshore salaries, investments, and bank accounts are no longer invisible. SARS is using data and analytics to match third-party information against tax returns and identify discrepancies. Now, what does that mean in practice? In practice, this increases the likelihood of audits, verification requests, and historical reviews where offshore income was not properly declared in the first place.
So help us understand, Roxana, is there a likelihood then that an individual may end up being double taxed, both by the country that they are resident in, where they're actually earning the income, and from their country of origin, South Africa?
Absolutely, there is a likelihood. Unless you submit an application to SARS via the DTA or double taxation application, you will be double taxed in both countries. There's a highly likelihood because the country that you are currently residing in will request you to pay taxes as well as South Africa. You need to invoke that type of a DTA with SARS to apply that privilege that you're now going to have. If it's not invoked and applied to SARS, it does not automatically happen. You have to physically go to SARS. Otherwise, unfortunately, you have the risk of being taxed in both places.
So this application would then be an application for exemption, is that it?
So this application will use the treaties between the two countries to determine which country has the right to tax you for that specific tax type.
And why has SARS decided to pursue the income of South African expats?
Well, from a SARS perspective, it's not something that they've decided right now. This has been happening for a while. This is about fairness and protecting the tax base. So South Africa operates on something called a residence-based system, and expatriates form part of that system. And it remains the concern of the expatriate taxpayer to ensure that they are enforcing the right status that they should in the South African tax base. So if they've not legally gone to SARS and changed that tax status, unfortunately, they will be looked at as a tax resident. So globally, tax authorities are under pressure to reduce cross-border tax leakages and ensure compliance. But SARS is aligning themselves with international standards and using modern data tools to close historic gaps. So I think in closing, it's not necessarily about targeting expats specifically. It's more about applying the existing law that we have more consistently and ensuring that taxpayers with international income are meeting their obligations. They are coming forth and deciding whether they'd like to cease that residency that they hold with SARS.
So what would your advice as, Letitia Africa be for South Africans who are living abroad right now? How can they be proactive in this scenario?
I think it's important to understand that being proactive means not waiting for SARS to contact you before taking action. That's the worst thing you could do. Practically, this involves reviewing your tax residency status, confirming whether your foreign income has been correctly declared, and then reassessing whether any corrective steps are needed at that stage. For some taxpayers, that may involve formalizing their tax immigration, which is very important. For others, it may just mean updating prior returns or seeking relief through available disclosure mechanisms, which is another important one that SARS offers. So it's also about maintaining proper records. And I think many taxpayers forget about this. Keep records of your foreign employment, your tax paid overseas, and your financial movements as well. And a structured review now is far less disruptive and costly than reacting to an unexpected SARS investigation later on.
Oh, thank you so much, Roxana Naidu. Some really important news coming out there regarding SARS. Thank you to you and Letita Africa for keeping us all in the know. Thank you for your time, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's Roxana Naidu, Head of Global Strategy at Letita Africa.
Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802.
It is exactly 4:52 Central African Time and we say bonjour, 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 Madame Joël. Comme ça va?
Ça va bien, merci. Bonjour à tous les auditeurs de Channel Africa. Sur Vue d'Afrique, tout à l'heure, il sera question du Nigeria. Au moins 170 personnes ont été tuées dans une nouvelle attaque djihadiste. Nous verrons les précisions avec notre correspondant sur place. Et au Tchad, le cadre permanent de dialogue politique a été installé mercredi lors d'une cérémonie officielle. Et évidemment, dans la deuxième partie de Vue d'Afrique, il sera question de sport avec Jolie Nosongo et notamment de la Coupe du Monde féminine. C'est tout à l'heure sur Vue d'Afrique. Merci de rester connecté. Merci Thami.
Merci beaucoup. That's Vue d'Afrique coming up at the top of the hour.
Africa, meet Abedi.
Yeah, that's me.
Abedi is a music lover through and through.
I really love African music.
He's got a taste for all kinds of tunes and spends his days listening to Channel Africa. Guess what? He didn't know.
Okay.
Channel Africa wants to help Abedi and all music lovers everywhere to discover even more incredible music. That is why Channel Africa is calling on all African musicians to submit their music. Musicians, remember to give us all your relevant information. Make your submissions at music@channelafrica.co.za. Submissions are your chance to be heard on radio. But sadly, they do not guarantee that you will be playlisted. All submissions will be carefully reviewed to see if they meet our station's requirement. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
It is exactly 4:53 Central African Time. Now, across the African continent, individuals and businesses are increasingly engaging global markets through cross-border trade, international study, remote work and offshore investment. Recent rand strength against major currencies presents a timely opportunity for South Africans to plan. When the local currency performs well, foreign currency becomes more affordable, making future international expenses easier to fund. Foreign exchange is no longer just for corporates or professional traders. It has become an essential tool for everyday financial planning. For more on this, we joined on the line by Bishop Watkins, Head of Product Manager for Forex and Global at Nedbank. Bishop Watkins, good to have you with us. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Good afternoon, Tommy, and good afternoon to the listeners. Great to be joining you.
So let's take a look at the last statement that I made regarding foreign exchange becoming more relevant for everyday Africans and not just something ring-fenced for businesses, which is what the common thought and practice had been in the past. Why is that? Why is foreign exchange becoming more relevant for us all?
Yeah, Tommy, that's such a powerful statement, especially if you really consider that Forex was considered foreign for a lot of people, out of reach for a lot of people in the past, and no longer is it just for the niche corporates or businesses. People are moving abroad, they're studying abroad, they're engaging abroad. There's no borders in terms of how people are moving. And that's why it's important that from a bank point of view and also just from economy point of view, they need simple ways to secure and manage their spend across borders. So it's no longer about nicheness and it's no longer about speculation. It's how do you enable me for my needs and for purposes of moving money seamlessly across geographies.
And why, Bishop, does timing matter when it comes to foreign currency planning?
It's so important because if you notice in terms of the latest movement around currency in terms of the dollar and the rand, where we've seen significant rand strength, it is very important for individuals to take hold of this opportunity when it happens, because when there's rand strength, it presents a unique opportunity to convert funds more efficiently. It also allows individuals to time based on the purpose and the goals or the needs that they have, that during favorable periods, they can hedge and use that period to really secure that foreign currency that they need for all the international commitments. It could be immediate or also for the future.
And from an ABC's 1 to 3, A to Z perspective, how can individuals start engaging with foreign exchange responsibly, especially if one doesn't have any prior experience?
Yes, that's a very good question. I think let's start with goals. What is your goal? What are you trying to achieve? Are you studying abroad? Are you trying to pay for a commitment that you have abroad? Are you saving for a travel need or travel expense that you might have in a few months' time? Those opportunities link back to how you save for the money, saving quickly for the money, securing that goal, and really making sure you use the formal channels to secure the currency that you need, linked to the goal in mind, and really, even if it's a small contribution, contributing gradually to that goal. Or even if you want to secure the lump sum, you can secure that goal, the funds immediately, and leverage it for any future exposure that you might need, whether it's to pay, to travel, or to invest internationally.
And how exactly do these foreign currency accounts work? And what role do they then eventually play in financial resilience?
Yeah, so how it works, and I think maybe just to simplify it, it's allowing you to secure your funds in foreign currency without the need and complexities to go overseas and open an account. You can basically secure your currency in South Africa locally, but any currency that you need, that you may need, whether it's dollars or whether it's pounds or euros. So I think in terms of the main currencies that the institutions offers, about 8 different currencies, and we hold that currency for you at that international currencies rate. So meaning that you're not exposed to currency fluctuations. It helps you preserve that currency that you're holding your purchasing power, and basically making sure that you're ready to use that money when you have to fulfill that specific needs that you have.
And this is a service that you as Nedbank offer?
Absolutely. We've got a foreign currency account that we offer today, which can be opened seamlessly, digitally, in under a few minutes. And you basically use our money app and open the account immediately. You can fund the account either with a lump sum immediately, or you can slowly fund it as and when you do have funds. And when you're ready to move those funds to either a store of value in terms of a travel card, you can also do it if you're ready to move the accounts to and you want to do a payment. You can also do it from the foreign currency account. So basically, we're securing your foreign currency in a safe space up until you're ready to move it for whatever need you have, whether it's education, travel, or business, or the funds to loved ones, or any other need that you may have.
I tell you what, Bishop Watkins, the advent of technology has really just removed all borders and made everything so seamless. We thank you so much for your time as well. I know that this is a very welcome development for all those who want to secure their funds in foreign currencies without necessarily having to leave. And just that convenience, as you say, being able to put your goals down and then able to plan towards future events. We thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you for having me.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you. That's Bishop Watkins, Head of Product Manager for Forex and Global at Nedbank. And what a great first discussion that we're having with Nedbank. Just a footnote that every single Thursday afternoon, we will be hosting Nedbank for our finances feature. So looking forward to chatting to them once again next week, Thursday. That's how we as Africa in Business come to the end of the Thursday edition from today. From myself, Thami Ngubeni, the entire team, give yourself a splendid afternoon and restez connectés as Vue d'Afrique comes up next.
Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 8.